Okay. Welcome everybody to the Babel Working Group meeting. Let's see, what do we have here? I'd like to see if anybody's willing to volunteer to be a Jabber scribe or a minutes taker. You could just activate your audio and speak up, or reply in the chat. I think I've actually got things set up so I can keep a look at Jabber, and I don't know if there'll be very much of the Jabber going on in any case. So I guess I will go ahead with the administrivia here. This is the No 12 statement about the IPR policies in the IETF. If you're aware of any patents or patent applications that you or your sponsor control, you should and that relate to something you're presenting in any way or discussing, you should make that known. And of course, this is public. Anybody can look at this. This will is all being recorded and be available later. People should. The agenda is all available online. You can download these slides and the other slides for this meeting, and you should take a look at them if you haven't had a chance to do so far. Just a reminder that document quality depends on people reviewing documents, and it's good for people to review documents. And if you want people who are in other IETF working groups to review your documents here, then perhaps you should review their documents there. This is the tentative agenda, which is I'm currently in the administrivia and agenda bashing. And we currently have 3 presentations, although I believe Mahesh will not be able to be here for his. So I guess either I'll give that, or perhaps Barbara, who's the immediately previous presentation, if she's willing to do so. We also need somebody to take some minutes. It would be highly desirable. So, Barbara, are you willing to take minutes? You have done that before. Or, let's see, I'm a little bit. I can got things set up here so I can actually watch the list of participants and the chat at the same time. Okay, so Barbara is willing to take minutes. Okay. I did this thing here from Julia's saying that he and Theophil, who's one of the first presenters, appear to be unable to log in. You need to have a data tracker ID to be able to log in. So I think you need to go to the datatracker.ietf.org and create a user ID for yourself. Let's see. I'm sending a response in chat. In any case, the question is there anybody who wants to change the agenda? If the first presenter has continuing difficulties logging in, we can change the order. I assume that would be okay with people. Does anybody want to do anything else or add or delete items on the agenda? It would appear not. So the next thing I have here is to go over the status of things in the working group. So this is the document status. So we have 3 documents that are past the IESG. We have one, there's I guess the applicability statement in the 2 security drafts. We have a document, the base protocol document, where there's one IESG discussed being resolved. We have 2 documents where publication is requested, the source specific and the information model. So that information model will come up later when Barbara presents. The Yang document is technically in working group last call, which has been running for a long time because there's been some delays. And I'm going to suggest later that we restart that working group last call. There's an expired working group draft. And there's also the first draft when we presented Bastian Babel before over 6. And there's a HomeNet profile, which is currently pending because it depended on Babel documents. And there's a draft on beer, which is a type of technique for handling multicast, which is a related document. Well, let's see, is Julius is logged in. Apparently TFL was still having problems, at least I guess that Julius could present if necessary. In any case, continuing with the status, we have all of our milestones completed that we currently have, except the submission of the Yang draft to the IESG. And I have a presentation later if we have time towards the end of the session where I'll propose adding some additional milestones. And so that's the milestone and document status. I have no idea what Julie says that Theo says that the data tracker says that a manual intervention is needed. I'm not sure why that would be true. Why don't I don't know, because people object, maybe we should go to the Babel information model presentation and delay Theophilus to see if that problem can be solved. Is there any objection to that? Okay. So, Barbara, would you like to request the... Hi, Julius, I've enabled your audio.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so before we start the actual talks, I would like to understand what is the status. So I'm understanding that the ISG is changing. So that means that there will be even further delay for the documents. Could you perhaps explain what the situation is?
Okay, see, I just cranked up my volume here. You were a little faint, but you're asking me to just go over the status of the documents again? Know what the effect is of the IESG
No, the
change?
question is that 6126 bis is being held up by a single AD and has been held up by just 2 ADs for a year now. Okay, we have managed to get it through all the ADs save one right now. And it is my understanding that the ISG has changed or is about to change.
It changed in March, yes, actually.
So what does that mean for the documents?
Because there were fewer positions taken by IESG members, that means that there needs to be more IESG members to vote no object or something. So I guess that would mean it's likely that there will be some more delay, but I don't think very much at this point.
Well, it has been a few years already of delay. My funding has ended in September last. David has changed companies. I think that the situation is pretty desperate and that we should be panicking now. And,
I believe we know how to get that ejection from that area director cleared. So I don't.
Yes, but now we have another bunch of area directors, and that means more work for us.
Well, already one of them is
energy on this.
Already one of them has voted no objection, and they had only editorial comments which are non-blocking.
So we don't give up yet. So we don't give up yet.
No, I don't.
Okay, so Donald, it has been a lot of energy, a lot of time spent, and now there are things that I don't quite understand that imply that there will be further delay. I'm worried about how much more energy I need to put into, discussing stuff with the ISG. I mean, I've been discussing stuff with the ISG for over a year now. That is a lot of energy, a lot of time. And so I would like to understand what's going on and how it's going to end, if it's going to end.
Well, I don't know if Martin would like to speak. I have enabled his microphone.
All right, I think this is David Skenazy. Hi, everyone.
Both of you are, both Martin and David are enabled.
Yeah, sorry, it was my first time using the new queue system. Well, this works well.
Just as a reminder to people, it is still useful to say who you are and what company you're with when you start speaking.
So this is David Skenazy, now with Google. Just so to comment on what Julius was saying as the co-author on RFC 6126 BIS, there have been delays, with this process, which is unfortunate, but luckily, thanks to Don and Martin, we have a path forward. So I think right now the action item, Julius, is for the two of us to make the latest edits proposed by Donald, and then post a revision. So we could post it this week now that they've unblocked submissions, and then that should allow Alvaro to lift his discuss. And once we have that, it'll be very swift to get the remaining ADs on board. I think once we clear the discuss, we should be in good shape.
Do you think we should be fixing a date at which we say, if it's not in the editor queue, we ask for publication as informational? I mean, how do we ensure that the algorithm actually terminates?
So there is no guarantee. This is like TCP. If you have 100% packet loss, your data is not going to get across.
Exactly.
And so
you have a timeout at some point.
Well, let's just be clear. I don't think everything needs to have a timeout. You know, if I'm underwater and I can't breathe, I'm going to keep trying no matter what. And so in this case, the main reason we chartered the Babel working group was to produce a standards track document, because that was needed for other groups like HomeNet. And also we were chartered to evolve the protocol. So I don't think we can stop until we have a standards track document. I don't think giving up is an option.
I'm going to probably retire in the early 2040s. So there is a default timeout at some point. Okay, so at some point we need to give up. We need to say we failed, we've given up. We've been speaking with the ISG for over a year now. We've been speaking with the ISG since July 2019. I took off all of my summer last year so that I could get these documents done. And over 1 year later, we are still discussing with the ISG. We need to make sure that this process terminates at some point.
Absolutely, but Julius, while I do agree that some members of the IG have been taking a long time to get back to us, I think the delay is also on the side of the authors. Right now, Donald has made and Martin have made it clear to us what Alvaro wants, and we haven't made those edits yet. So let's make those edits before we start any timeout, because right now it's it's our job to reply. Yeah,
Okay.
I know. Well,
so we are
let's send a revision and go from there.
So are you saying that we are not fixing a timeout at this point?
I wouldn't know what action to take on a timeout personally, but that's just my opinion.
Do you agree with that, Donald?
I do.
Okay.
Okay.
How do I get out of the queue?
Yeah, actually, yes, same question. How do I cut my microphone and leave the queue?
Well, I can do it for you.
Awesome, thank you.
Zap, you're on. And you can ask to get back in again if you need to say something. So let's see, if Theophil is still having problems, either Julia should present or we should just go right ahead, as I was planning with Barbara Stark presenting the next one, and then we can move the IPv4 over IPv6 to later. So what I was heading for was to have Barbara present. And actually, Barbara is currently on just as a Jabber user. Well, that's fascinating. Maybe.
Me?
Oh, hi.
Hey.
Oh, there you are. Hi. Okay. I'm sorry.
It's all very
ahead.
disconnected
because it moved you up when you became, your microphone was enabled, so you weren't down where it's under B for Barbara. So okay, go ahead.
Do I need to get in the queue? Let's see.
No, you're okay. Unless you want to, you can.
No, I'm fine using.
Turn on your video if you want. You can.
No, this machine doesn't have video, so.
Okay.
Okay, so the information model. Yeah. Let's move on to the next screen. Thank you so much, Antonin, for doing the PR with those fixes. That was a big help. Those are the things that Antonin fixed, and I merged it yesterday into the editor's version. I haven't actually gone through, GitHub is not my forte, so I'm going to actually go through and make sure that everything looks fine. And hopefully nobody has any problem with this. This was all pretty much editorial. But then we also had discussion, if you can go to the next screen, on a couple of other issues earlier this year, clearing versus enabling statistics. We discussed that the two Booleans we have for statistics do need to be separate, that the enabling merely enables and disables the collection, and it when you enable it just picks up kind of where it left off, and it doesn't clear out anything. And if you want to clear out the statistics, you have to hit the reset, and I need to make sure that the description is properly evokes that behavior. And I do believe we agreed on that, so I do need to do a change just to make sure that the description works for that. But now the next thing that was very closely related, and I separated this into two, is on the next screen, the log, the packet log. So this one was just a little bit trickier, and it really gets trickier in given what Mahesh says about Yang, and I'd really like some input from implementers on some of this. And so what I had mentioned was, okay, so we have the Babel packet log enable. We don't have any mechanism to reset, and so it's really unclear as to what sorts of behaviors you can or should get. I envisioned 4 different possible behaviors. I consider 2 to be a bit problematic. Hopefully it's not too much of an eye chart, or you can bring up your own version there. But in the absence of having any sort of reset function, I would think we would expect behavior 3, which is where you have an existing referenced file and you just append to it constantly. If we had a reset function, we could do 1 or 2. I mean 1 or 4, but I think that one, number 2, should be avoided. And there, of course, is no expectation for logs to persist across reboot. So let's go on to the next page, which is what Mahesh had to say about Yang not being able to really do much of anything. Did you go to the next screen? So he said that Yang cannot enforce what happens outside of the model. It can't enforce file or memory. All it can do is clear the reference to the log file memory, which is a bit odd and not really that great of a thing, because I'd hate to have memory just filling up because of logging. And so, that may be an issue with Yang, but I'd like to get some feeling of other implementers, if anybody has implemented any of the packet logging, and what your thoughts are on how to clear out old packet logs so you can start new packet logs. And I'd like to pause here to see if anyone has thoughts on that.
Sure. Anybody who wants to respond, just stick your hand up with the microphone there by your name, and I'll enable you.
Well, I'm not getting any takers, am I?
Yeah, people can post to the list. Later we can post a question there also. And,
okay, so not sure what to do about being able to control the clearing of packet logs, or in any way control that behavior, or know what the behavior would be. So I'd really kind of appreciate some input on this, and it may be that nobody's implementing this, in which case we definitely need to keep it very simple. Okay, so let's move on, which is just a screen that says I'd like some input. And so now the other thing, this came about, I hate to open up any can of worms, but there was, some discussion that I got of, it may be that some people would like for their implementation to converge fast, and that would mean more chattiness, and others would prefer less chattiness and are perfectly happy with a slow convergence. And this was just a question of whether we would want an additional Boolean in order to allow a user to express that if the implementation supports different algorithms for different convergence. And does anyone have thoughts on that? Not hearing anything or seeing anything. Okay, so those were everything I had. And my question was, okay, if we don't do anything about converge fast or anything new about the file, the packet logging file,
Barbara?
then yes, I hear a voice.
it's Julia's.
Me, it's so good to hear you, Barbara. I'm wondering, so that's a macro essentially, the converge fast thing. That's a macro for a set of parameters, right?
I'm sorry, it's a what set of parameters?
It is a single parameter that
yes.
influences a whole set of other parameters, right?
Right. It would simply express a user choice of, I like converge fast or slow.
Here suddenly you have redundant information, because you have converge fast, and what happens if you set converge fast to true but the interval to 1 hour? Since in your Yang model, you can also, in your information model, you can also set explicitly the various intervals, right?
Oh, is that there?
I think so, if memory serves. I don't have it under my eyes, but my memory was that we did put them in. So here suddenly you have two ways of expressing the same thing. And now you're opening a whole can of worms, which takes priority if they contradict each other.
I'm looking to see.
I would rather be in favor of leaving this kind of convenient, user-friendly macros to the user interface, and have the information model correspond more closely to what is going on in the implementation.
So would it be the hello interval?
There's the hello interval, there is the update interval. So if Converge Fast concerns what is, I think, in a previous version, I don't think it's in the last version, the shorter intervals, there are quite a few parameters that it changes. But all of those parameters are individually exported in the information model. So here you're introducing redundancy, and this kind of macros are useful, but they're best left to the user interface.
The problem is those are not writable. Not directly. Now, yeah, they're not writable in the data model. They're read-only.
Are they?
Yeah. Is that a problem? I mean, should we make them writable?
It's unexpected. It's unexpected to me.
Because at the time you were, I think, suggesting that I mean, it's certainly very complex to allow a user to directly write to those. And I think it was desirable to have the user know what they were, but there was no real good reason for a user to change them at the time.
I have no memory whatsoever of this discussion. Okay, shall we take it offline, because here
Excellent.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that may be a good idea, because we're. By the way, the way this
here.
Yeah, the way this Mideco is set up here for these, at least for the first set of sessions this morning, it cuts off right sharply at the end. It's poof. So we need to be careful about time.
Yep. Okay, so the last slide was just, if we do changes, I do need to post another draft. First, I think I'd like to have this discussion just to see what to do about that. And then do we need to do another WGLC, or are these?
I would think that not for these, if these changes, especially if they're discussed on the mailing list and there's no substantial objection, then I think we don't need to do another working group last call. And the draft is actually in publication requested state right now. But I think our area director is aware of what's going on, and I think we can still update it at this point.
Right, and some of this is because of the comments that came through in the IESG last call on the 6126 BIS. So.
Okay, yeah. So do you want to present Mahesh's thing real quick, Barbara?
Sure, while I'm here.
Which is that's this one on the Yang model. The Mahesh has a conflict, so he's unable to make this session, unfortunately.
Yep.
And so go ahead, I guess.
Okay, so Mahesh has done a great job tracking the information model. He'll need to make a few changes because of the pull request we accepted from Antonin, but he has no problem doing that. And of course, if we make other changes, he'll need to change that. Let's move on. So there was he asked several times if we needed to add any special support other than default routing policy, and there was no response, so he closed the issue with the assumption, which I think is correct, that we really don't want anything special. I think that would be way too complex. I was personally opposed to trying to do anything special, so I'm happy. And it's certainly easier to do nothing. That's always just the easiest thing to do. Okay, so if no comments, let's move on. It's ready for working group last call.
So lastly, actually, a while ago, when we thought things were more settled, there was a working group last call started, but I think it's become kind of stale. So I think we should probably renew, start a new working group last call, and consider the previous one to be timed out or something.
Okay. So. Well, I don't expect to have any more comments, so we can certainly do a quick one.
Yeah. Does anybody have any objection to doing a working group last call, which is kind of what the working group last call asks anyway, if they have objections to the document? Okay. Not hearing nothing, I guess we will do that and do another working group last, restart the working group last call on the Yang document. So I see in the chat there's still problems with Theophil getting on, but Julius is willing to present for him. Actually, he wanted to run the slides himself, but I don't know if Julius wants to do that. I can certainly turn over the video to him.
If I'm doing the presentation, I don't have the slides. I've actually never seen this version of the slides. I've reviewed 2 previous versions of the slides, so I should be okay. But this particular version I've never seen. So if there are any last-minute joke, I will laugh with you.
I'm happy to run the slides. There are some animations, but that shouldn't be a problem. No.
Theophile? Okay, I'll just confirm with Theo. Okay, so this is a talk given by Théophile Bastien, and it was joint work with me. More exactly, it was under my supervision. Théophile is being paid by, am I allowed to say the name of the company who funds Theo? Is it okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's written at the bottom of the slide.
Yeah.
So anyway, so next slide, please. So just to remind everyone about what we are doing here, this whole working group is about a routing protocol. And the goal of a routing protocol, the only goal of a routing protocol, anything else is just useless verbiage or technical details, is to build a routing table. Now, it will surprise nobody that the routing table maps network prefixes to next hops. Okay, I'm not going, I think you are just as familiar with that as I am. And one thing that you've always assumed and that you've never asked yourself the question is that it maps an IPv6 destination prefix to an IPv6 next hop, or it maps an IPv4 network prefix to an IPv4 next hop. Next slide, please.
Oops, sorry.
Now, how is this routing table used? Well, it is used when you do forwarding packets, and I'm a little bit shaky on this slide because it is due to Theo. That the whole point is that the next hop is being used when a router is forwarding a packet. So it receives a packet, it finds the right entry using, this longest longest prefix semantics, finds the right next hop. And at this point, next slide, please. Next slide. So it considers in the routing table the right entry. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. At which point, it uses the next hop that it found in the routing table to find out the MAC address of the next hop interface. So it says, hey, using the IPv4 address that it found in the next hop entry of the routing table, what's your MAC address? And the router replies, next slide, please. Next slide, Donald. Yeah, it says, hey, no, come back.
Oh, sorry, there's a time delay.
Yeah, I find it confusing too. Okay. And it says, hey, my MAC address is, and gives the MAC address. That's the ARP protocol for IPv4, the neighbor discovery protocol for IPv6. Next, please. But the whole point, and the point that is not initially obvious when you start looking at those things, is that the next hop address is only used in order to find a MAC address. It never appears on the wire. You never, ever use it. The only IP addresses that actually appear on the wire are the source address and the destination address. Next slide, please. The only purpose is to use to find the MAC. And for that reason, there is no reason why the next hop addresses in an IPv4 routing table should be restricted to IPv4. You could actually short circuit everything and stick directly MAC addresses into your routing table. But what you can also do is to stick IPv6 next hop addresses in an IPv4 routing table and replace ARP with neighbor discovery. So you're routing normal IPv4 packets look, guys, there's no tunneling whatsoever involved. You're doing a normal IPv4 networking. The only thing that changes is that the next hop addresses are using IPv6. Next, please. Okay, so what you end up doing is that you have exactly the same process. And the only difference is that in the routing table, you find an IPv6 next hop address. Next, please. At which point, you do exactly the same manipulation as you did with an ordinary IPv4 table, except that instead of finding out the MAC address using ARP, you find it using IPv6 neighbor discovery. Next, please. Okay, and the forwarding proceeds as normal. Next, please. Okay, so you get a new kind of entries in your routing tables. In a routing table, you have usually two kinds of entries in a double stack protocol such as Babel. You have v4 routes and v6 routes. And here you have a third kind of route, which we call the v4 over v6 route. We're not very happy with the terminology, so if anyone has better suggestions, in particular, when you say v4 over v6, people tend to think that there is tunneling involved, but there is absolutely no tunneling involved here. It's normal IPv4 forwarding. And this is extremely useful. The main point is that it means that the next hop interface does not need to have a v4 address. So you end up having the ability to have a v6 only core. Your routers have only IPv6 addresses, and you are serving v4 routes to your clients without ever using a tunnel. And that's not an original idea. We found the idea in a draft that applies to BGP, and it was explained to me by a guy called Donald at an IETF meeting. Not this Donald, a different guy called Donald, whose name I forget. But it is in a draft, which is cited on this slide. Next, please. Okay, so if we are going to push a new kind of routes into the routing table, we need the forwarding plane to be able to support this kind of route. So the forwarding plane is either your kernel if you're doing software routing, or it is your hardware if you're doing hardware routing. We don't know about hardware, but the main motivation for this work is that v4 over v6 routes have been supported in Linux since July 2019. And we even have on this slide the exact commit. And you can try them on your own. You can use them using manual routing. So the syntax is exactly the same as for v4 routes. The only difference is that you add the inet6 keyword before the next hop address in the IP route add command. Next, please. Okay, so what Theo has done is to design a Babel protocol extension that allows routing in a network that has not had any v4 addresses assigned, v4 addresses assigned. So how does it work? Well, if your interface does have a v4 address, you behave just like an extended Babel. So there are no changes. If you use Theo's code in a network in which all interfaces have IPv4 addresses, you won't see any difference with an extended Babel. On the other hand, if your interface has only v6 addresses, well, if it receives a v4 route, it installs it anyway. The point is that the outgoing router's IPv4 address is completely irrelevant. Linux is quite able to route IPv4 with no IPv4 address on the outgoing interface. Now, the problem you have is when you announce a v4 route. Since you have no v4 address on the interface, you don't have a natural address, an address to put in the next hop field of the packet. So what you do here is that you announce a v4 over v6 address, a v4 route with a v6 next hop. Next, please. So there are various ways of encoding this. And when we chose the encoding, we decided, do you want to continue, Teofil? Or shall I do it? Teofil is now online. Okay, don't hesitate to interrupt me if you want to take over. So one of the things that we absolutely wanted was to remain compatible. I think that's a very strong selling point for Babel, is that we have remained compatible for the last 10 years. What we wanted is that an unextended, that you could have in a single network unextended nodes and nodes with TL's extension. So a node needs to be able to ignore v4 over v6 routes. So older nodes need to be able to ignore v4 over v6 and continue to route correctly pure v4 and v6. And there were various encodings considered. And just to make a quick reminder, in Babel, the tag that is used to tag both next hops and prefixes is called the address encoding. There are three of those. There are IPv4 addresses, IPv6 addresses, and local IPv6 addresses that use a compressed representation. Next, please. And so we consider various encodings. And the two encodings that seem the most reasonable are the one that we call the Toki encoding and the one that we call the Théophile encoding. So number one is what was suggested by Toki, and Toki said, look, don't change anything to the protocol. What you do is you just announce IPv4 routes. And if no IPv6 next hop, if no IPv4 next hop has been set, you interpret them as v4 over v6 routes. And it looked weird to me. It is backwards compatible, but it's difficult to work out from the exact wording that it is backwards compatible. And that's something that implementers might get wrong. And it's not clear that an extension is being used. There is no TLV. There is no way, just by examining the packet, all the TLVs in the packet, you need to look at the ordering of the TLVs to find out that we're using the extension. So that was a very smart encoding, but it was too smart for my taste. What we suggest instead is to use a new encoding for v4 over v6 routes. So the new AE is used only for v4 over v6 routes, and it's only used in the update TLV. It is not used for the next hop. And a v4 over v6 routes reuses the v6 next hop. It's obviously backwards compatible since new encoding is going to be clear. It's more obvious from the packets what's going on. It is a tiny bit more verbose, but quite frankly, it doesn't make a lot of difference in practice. Next, please. Next, please. Okay, so to conclude, there is a new type of route, v4 over v6, that uses a v4 destination, but a v6 next hop. It routes IPv4 over a pure IPv6 network. There are no tunnels involved. The protocol has been described, and there is a draft that has been there is an internet draft. We have still has a production-ready implementation that I still need to review and to mark, but I'm fairly confident it will go well. We think that it should be experimental. We have no idea how to proceed from here. And although I did the presentation, the work is almost entirely due to Théophile Bastien. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you.
So I see a
Margaret?
question.
Do you want to speak, Margaret?
Oh.
Maybe not.
I see a question in the Jabber.
Let's see, David there.
So David is asking whether I could describe what... Yeah.
So if we could go back one slide, please, just on the open question for the group.
Hello?
Hi, Margaret.
Go ahead, Mark.
Go ahead. Whoever was talking, I just...
Oh, all right. I guess I'll just finish and I'll hand it back. And I forget to say my name. This is David Skenazy. So just to fully understand the options we have here. So question for Julius or Théophile, now that you're here. With the first encode, to refresh my memory, and I apologize, it is very early here. My coffee hasn't kicked in yet. But on the Toki encoding, can it cause backwards compatibility issues if with an implementation that hasn't adopted the extension, or should everything just work? What are the risks of it being too clever?
So with the Toki encoding... Yeah,
maybe I might explain.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, by the way. So if you look at the RFC for Babel, an extended Babel, you will see that it is stated that if a route has no obvious next hop at this point where it is received, the node should just drop the route and not use it at all. So if you have an extended Babel which receives a v4 route with no v4 next hop, it should drop the route. And with this extension, if it had Toki's encoding, it should accept the route as v4 over v6. So there is theoretically no problem in backwards compatibility, but it might be possible that someone decides that maybe there is a smart next hop for v4 routes with no v4 next hop or something, and it might break. It's not as obvious as if you don't know an AI, just drop it.
I see. And so just to clarify,
what is more, David, what is more is that you're relying on proper error handling, and experience shows that people get error handling wrong. Okay. So,
I can't
so here,
go ahead.
Yeah. So here we are assuming that people deal correctly with the error situation. I got a route and I have no relevant next hop. Okay. It is ignored because people implemented the error handling case correctly. I expect people to get error handling wrong. So it is backwards compatible, assuming everybody has implemented their error handling just right.
Okay, yeah, because so I can't access my Babel implementation anymore, but I'm very willing to bet that I got this wrong, because I'm good at getting things wrong like that. So and another thing I'll add is, so if you send, let's say, v6 net hop, then a v4 update, and then a v4 next hop, then like what you're describing is clear because you haven't had a v4 next hop. But what if it's in the other order? Let's say I send a v4 next hop and then a v6 next hop and then an update. Would that, with the current draft, would that use the v4 next hop, or would I need to only send it without having sent a v4 next hop TLV? If that sentence made any sense.
So so if you say send an update in which AE?
So v4 AE, and there has been a v4 next hop a while back, but then there has been
here you're purely deterministic. If the AE is v4, you use the v4 next hop. If the AE is v6, you use the v6 next hop. If the AE is v4 over v6, you use the v6 next hop.
No, I meant with the Toki encoding. The one with the AE is very easy to reason about. I'm just trying to see if the Toki one, what are the problems with the Toki one? But I'm definitely noticing that it's harder to think about.
The Toki encoding, so what we do, there is no reason to send in a single TLV both v4 and v4 over v6. Either you have a v4 next hop, in which case you send v4, or you don't, in which case you send v4 over v6.
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay, so the case just doesn't occur.
So this is Donald. So we have very little time left. I'm going to drop the last presentation off the agenda. So we only have a couple minutes left. So if anybody new wants to speak to this, I don't know what you wanted to say, Margaret.
I have to.
Oh. This is okay.
I have just a couple of quick comments.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of them is I think you should call it IPv4 via IPv6 rather than over. The other is that I think that there's an issue here with ICMP errors coming back because they won't, the nodes that are on the ends are v4, but they'll be getting ICMP errors back from an IPv6 only router, and I don't think they'll be able to receive them. And I think there are cases maybe where that doesn't matter, or you want to argue that that doesn't matter, but I think that should at least be discussed in the draft, and there should be some explanation of what's going to happen in that case and what, therefore, the limitations are.
Agreed on both points.
Okay.
Tentatively agreed on the first one, and you're absolutely right on the second one. That's something we didn't consider.
Okay, the previous session ended right on spot, which would be right now, but I think maybe there, Meet Echo people are adjusting these things in real time, so we might have 5 more minutes. So we could continue to discuss this, or I could zip through my presentation quickly, whichever people want to do.
I've said what I want to say on this. I
Okay.
don't know. I can't take myself out of the queue, I don't think.
Yes, you can, I think, but I'll do it. There you go. There's some way to take yourself out of the queue, I know. Okay, well, since we seem to have some more time here, I was just going to go through real quick what's going on in our, this sort of work items described in the charter, and we've substantially done the work select resolve to discuss on 6126 bis, and information model, Yang model, just a little bit to get them over the line. There is a thing in the charter where we're supposed to do something related to implementation experience, but it specifically says it doesn't need, we don't have to prepare a document. Reports at meetings concerning implementation experience would be good. There have been some such reports, but not recently, so it would be good to do something about that. And the current charter does give us, have an optional work item to work on multicast. And there's been at least one draft related to that that's been presented a couple times. Whether that would work or not, I don't know. That's another question, of course. So there are possible new lines, this IPv4 via or whatever, v6. There was a type of service specific routing draft a while ago, which expired. And there's the possibility of doing a IEEE 8211 mesh path selection protocol using Babel, which basically just means sort of integrating it with IPv6 and with 80211, which doesn't require any changes on the part of IEEE, at most a code point. And there's precedent where they did previously assign a code point for a IPF draft that was working on developing a path selection protocol. But that's kind of a big thing and might be a little hard to do, and possibly would be required to get a liaison from 80211 saying that it was okay for us to do that. So I'm sort of rushing through this, but the slides are all available. So basically, changes to milestones. I'm suggesting we change the submission of the Yang to push out into the future, and that we adopt milestones to adopt the IPv4 over IPv6 draft, and to adopt a multicast draft, and put the multicast draft deadline pretty far into the future. I think we can do this change to the milestones without changing the charter, because the multicast is already in the charter, and I think the IPv4 via IPv6 is just sort of an extension of the existing protocol. It's not too like a big change or anything like that. So if anybody has any comments on this, that'll be fine. Otherwise, I guess post this stuff to the mailing list to see if people agree. And doing a charter update is a big deal. So it's best to avoid that unless we need to do that. So that was my presentation here. I think we now have 1 minute left to the end of the 5-minute extension. So unless anybody has anything they want to bring up or say, thanks to everybody for participating, and we can discuss.
There's another person in the queue. I just wanted to comment that we might want to actually make sure the working group adopts those drafts before we make milestones for them. But also Ronald Intveld is in the queue and hasn't been.
Excuse me.
Ronald, I don't know how to say his last name. I'm sorry, Ronald. But he's in the queue.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I'm not. Oh, this is the first time I've done this. Sorry. So he's He can speak now. Go ahead.
Hi, Ron Infeld here.
Yes, sorry.
Was pronounced pretty well, by the way. Yeah, I have a question on the expired draft, the RTT extension. Is there any plan to revive that one? Because I think it's interesting. And by the way back in Singapore, I took an action to review it. I've read it now. I have a couple of minor comments, but since it's expired, I'll hold off on those until I know what's going on.
I would say we'd welcome your comments, even if the draft has expired, and you should probably ping the authors to see if they plan to update it. And once it's been submitted to the IETF, you know, it's the IETF. So if the authors aren't willing to do any more work because they've moved on, but you want to, you could just take over the draft. But I think comments on it would be useful and would indicate interest in that kind of work.
Yeah, well, I am interested. It's interesting, I think.
Okay, that's good. Okay, well, unless there's something else, I guess I will close this session.
Thank you to Gabrielle for taking the notes. Did an excellent job, as always.
Great. I would thank him also. And not hearing any other comments, I have to figure out how to end the meeting. I guess that would be this. So, one last chance. Anybody want to say anything? Okie doke. I would suspect the November meeting may also be virtual, but we shall see. Thanks a lot. Bye.